Welcome everybody to Spike Down. My name's Keith Fortune. Joining me is Roy, and Challengers is back, baby. We're back. The action is kicked off. The off season felt super long, but it is gone, and we're diving straight into the season. And what a better way to start than jumping into after week one, heading into week two. We kind of get to see the players, and it gives us some great talking points. But I wanted to start with talent predictions because, Roy, some of them, actually, you know what? I can say this. All of them got some of them got some right. A lot of them, no 100%ers. No one got 100%. So
let's see if we can get 100%, Keith, because to be fair, we're here roasting them, but we haven't even put ourselves in their shoes yet. So before I go too crazy on them, I'm gonna cut them some slack. It was a hard week of matches to predict. You know, it's the opening week. We're still learning about these teams, so we got to give them some slack. But no one is safe. I'm just saying that right now. Like, no one is safe.
Yeah, no one's gonna get off. I will tell you, however, I did some predictions on my end. I got everyone wrong, but the oxygen one. Or everyone
you got
right.
All wrong.
I'm sorry. Oh my goodness, everyone wrong. No, I'm not that bad. I got everything right, correct, except the oxygen one. And to be honest, I think I get a little leeway there because I don't know if anyone expected Moist. I mean, clearly some of the predictions did, some of the talent, but
for sure. So how are we gonna do this? We're gonna go one by one.
Yeah, let's just run through list by list, day one by day one. I mean, immediately you look at day one, match one, Oxygen, Moist. Everyone's out except Dryad and I hold shift to try to get a flawless. So immediately, good to I hold shift and Dryad. I want to know what they were thinking with that prediction. I mean, I guess it is base, but kind of a wild take week one to just get a shy away from Oxygen who have won everything and haven't lost to Moist and Moist X Shopify in the off season.
For sure. I'm actually just shocked that it's not more 50-50, right? Because like when I look at that matchup, like, yeah, Moist did make like a sort of last second change to their roster, but I don't really like when I'm seeing this matchup, I'm not thinking like, oh, Oxygen is a clear winner or oh, Moist is a clear winner. Like to me, it feels extremely 50-50. Like it could go either way, and it pretty much did.
Yeah. And that is super exciting to think about Oxygen and Moist X Shopify and how that builds. We got a mix. Well, not a mix. A majority sad. One Winthrop. Gompers is a big fan. And it looks like the sad train rolled into the station. M80, not much to say there. Doing what they do best. Nitro's in there. That team seems to be starting to click. I wouldn't say it's a comfortable feeling yet, but I would definitely say they're on the right track. TWT, Core, YFP, Thinking Men, a big mix there, and I think rightfully so.
Yeah, that one is definitely a toss-up for sure. I mean, we didn't really know what to expect from TWT, right? They made a lot of roster changes. There was a lot of like players getting moved up, moved down to different teams. So it was like a massive toss-up. And of course, Core is coming from the open qualifiers, excuse me. And I mean, they're a long-standing roster, and they have a full. They're probably one of the only teams in Challengers besides obviously the big three that have like a full-on like. They have a whole team. Like they have a coach, an analyst, 5 players. You know, I mean, they have a manager that's extremely active with the roster. Like they're ready to roll. They have a whole cavalry.
Yeah, they have a daily agenda, that's for sure. But more organized than me, I'd imagine. YFP Thinking Men, another split one. YFP ended up taking that one in the end. And Turtle Tube Glazers, one Glazer fan in Vancillion, and he was almost looking like a genius. But a third map TTR pull it back. An exciting first week, I'd say. Pretty much, I would say everyone did okay on their picks. I can't blame them for the picks they make. You know, it'd be nice to be perfect. But a lot of these teams run out entities, and I'm just excited to see the predictions next week because you and I get to sit here and talk about them and have some fun on their behalf without them being here. It's kind of fun. So
I love that. I love that one-sided roast session. It's perfect.
yeah. Better not say anything on Twitter, guys. Please don't clap back at us. We're sensitive. Matches that stood out last week, as we mentioned, a lot of good matches. The teams that we wanted to performed, and one of them is M80 playing the newly crowned TSM team. And it was a close game overall, Roy. I felt like Nitro and the boys were a little slow to get in that match pace, but the same could be said about TSM. It was kind of them taking turns, getting comfortable and figuring things out. But M80, I mean, what else can you say about that team other than looking super solid overall?
I mean, I'll throw in one thing that we can talk about M80 besides us just completely glazing them.
Of course.
I think their compositions are actually really interesting. They're really leaning into the kind of like the duelist Omen with Koala Noob, right? They have a pretty interesting comp on Icebox, which I thought they played phenomenally, by the way. I really like their approach. But I mean, just for that matchup though, I do want to touch on one specific point, right? Is that like TSM is kind of like a Frankenstein roster, right? Like it got put together super last minute. There's a lot of changes that were happening, a lot of uncertainty with the roster coming into like the beginning of the split. But they kind of showed their potential in the first map. But the big takeaway for me is that clearly their map pool is not extremely developed at the moment. And that's a big asterisk, is like at the moment. They have the pieces, they have very talented players. The season could go either way for them. But for right now, it's very clear that M80 has a much stronger and deeper map pool, which I think a lot of teams are going to have to match if they really want a chance to come out on top in that group.
And before I dive into M80, because everyone knows I'm an M80 stan, a couple highlights for TSM, right? I think Poise looked really good, someone we haven't seen in quite some time. He seemed to really have that ice in his veins, winning some really big rounds for TSM when they're scrapping back on Lotus. Aprodo, the Aprodig, still applicable, still getting those big kills on some eco rounds that they converted. And then obviously my M80 love, Nitro, on the pretty much pure KJ, happened Lotus Icebox for the first two, and that's all he got to play. It was nice to see BCJ back into match play, and I'm assuming for both of them. I'm assuming for both of them, right? It's a big relief to kind of get in. Nitro said they've been scrimming for 8 months leading into this first match. That's a long time, and a lot can go wrong in your head leading into 8 months into one match. But I do want to say Xander and Ismo, exactly how I remember them from last year.
M80 just doesn't really have a weakness. Like they have great players. Their role diversity is amazing. Like all of them are just so flexible. Like Koala can just jump on an Omen. And like it feels like nothing has changed. Like he's still going for the hyper aggressive plays. Like he's still kind of doing his thing. Like BCJ is a great fill for the EU that they lost from last season. And of course Nitro is a massive pickup for that roster as well. And like, dude, the coaching staff is also great. Like they still have power hitters in the coaching staff. Like M80 is just such a strong team. But I mean, on the other side, we do kind of need to touch on like the sort of roles with TSM that's happening right now, right? Is like this is Seven's debut in the initiator role. We haven't really seen him play that role before. He was a duelist at one point, and he kind of got Sentinel locked, and then now we're like seeing him on the info initiator, which is like a massive change of pace, communication. Like it's just a completely different role and just how it functions within the team, right? So I think it's just going to take a little bit of time for them to kind of like work out some of the rust, I think. But once they get going, I think we'll see a much stronger TSM.
Yeah, I'm excited. And I want to keep my eye on Sim and kind of see his player development. Somebody who was pretty much primarily main jet, a little bit of Raze last season. Now we get him thrown on a KO on Icebox, right? And you mentioned TSM map pool. I mean, I'm really interested to see, because, the other 4 players, we know what they can do. We know the roles they can play. Sim is kind of an unknown still, where we know his talent, and it was mainly shown on, the Jet. It was mainly shown on the Raze, and he's played a little bit of KO, but I really want to see how that can develop further. So keep your eyes on TSM. Definitely a team not to sleep on at M80. Great to see them jump right into form, and to hear from Nitro, and cool storylines there that are only going to progress. And the other big match that we want to cover, shouldn't be a surprise to anybody, is Moist Oxygen. One of the games that, when the schedule came out and I saw it was the first match of the season, I was like, okay, they know what they're doing scheduling this first, and the players apparently knew what they were doing too, because this BO3 I would say delivered at, I want to say 2 of the best teams in Challengers. I know I just talked about M80, but got to be the best 2 teams in Challengers right now.
From my perspective, Moist and Oxygen are part of the big 3. And I'm not talking Kendrick, J. Cole, and Drake. I'm talking. Good.
Thank you for clarifying.
I had to make sure, like Moist, Oxygen, M80 are like, in my mind, like they're in the S tier of Challengers right now. And then from there, it's just like we don't really know the power rankings. And of course, by the end of the season, like obviously there's so much talent in this scene, right? Like anyone can end up on top. Like we never know what's really going to happen. But in my current power ranking perspective lens, as I shall say, it's looking like M80, Moist, and Oxygen are the big 3 right now.
Yeah, and this series completely delivered. And not only did we get some really cool maps in really cool orders. I'm a big fan of Lotus. I think it's a perfect first map pick if you're comfortable on it. Split map number 2 in this series and bind to round it out. Every map had a different feel to it. The comps were completely different, at least from map to map. There wasn't a lot of overlap. Like, there are 3 players who played, or actually 4 players who played 3 different agents across 3 maps. That's really cool to see. And that shows the depth of Moist, and it shows the depth of Oxygen. But I think my main overarching point of this series, it felt like the Verno Redux duo, hard supported, hard setup, really pushing for it. Where Moist and Shopify, I felt like they had the depth where Oxygen had the firepower. It's an interesting balance to me.
And that's very weird to say, because when you look at Oxygen, like you see Dapper, you see Scuba, Redux, Verno, like all of them are just crazy at what they do, right? But I think this meta is honestly just a real test of flexibility, I feel like, right? Because like last year, we were seeing a lot of like comp singularities, like people running mostly like meta comps with like slight variations, right? But like now we're seeing like every map, people are just taking out comps, so they're reinventing the wheel, right? And it's just like the meta is pretty wide open right now. So the teams that are the most flexible, I think, will probably end up like the ones finding the most success, right? Especially with like how like versatile the map pool is right now, where it's like every map is completely different in the way it plays and then pacing and the compositions. So yeah, I'm not surprised to see like the flexibility coming out from the MXS side.
Yeah, and I think we knew it before this series started, but Raze is currently the go-to duelist to play. Jet's kind of taken a bit of a backseat. And I think when I see Redux and Mata across 3 completely different maps that split Lotus, you could get the Jets, more so split. But to go through 3 maps and have both your primary duelists playing the exact same duelist, and I want to note also your controller players, both primary controller players, playing Viper throughout the entire all 3 maps. I think that really shows you where we're at in the meta, and the other 3 players on each team, big flex. And if this is kind of the creativity we're going to get throughout the season, I think we're going to see some cooler comps in Challengers than we are in VCT. Hot take, maybe?
That might be a slight hot take. I feel like the comps have mostly been tame. Like there are teams who are experimenting to some degree, but I think a lot of teams are just kind of, there's like a variable right now happening on the certain maps. But the most important thing, in my opinion, is like the flexibility again, like kind of a major talking point. Like if you look at Verno playing Killjoy and Gecko over 3 maps, right? Like how are you on Sentinel on one map and then you're the main info initiator on the other, right? And same thing with Brock. It's like, it's the same thing. It's like these teams are just like, there's so much role sort of like swaps between maps that it's really just a massive test. But to be fair, we did get Lotus, Split, and Bind, which are the Raze maps right now. So it's a 50-50 map pool. Like you see Jets a lot on the Icebox, you see Jets a lot on the Breeze, right? Like it's still a very meta and on just not those 3 maps, essentially.
yeah, and maybe that's, I'm excited to see, you know, as we progress through the stages, what kind of maps these teams are going to lean to. Really cool map pool, though, to kick it off. Let's talk about feelings. I know, episode 1, we're talking about feelings, but no, not Roy's and I's feelings we have for each other, but feelings we have on exciting teams. We've written down 3. We've written down SAD, Glazers, YFP. I'll let Roy kick it off with SAD. What a cool team, though.
I'm trying to come off not biased because I have been teammates with a lot of the players on SAD, but I think the talent on that team is super underrated. Like Darkest, such a strong player. Coburg, very strong player. Zostol, like you look at this roster, right? You see Bob. I mean, Bob is an extremely vocal like player, right? Like she's been wanting to IGL. She's been in that kind of like leadership position for a while, but you look at that roster and you think Zostol is IGLing. Like, what? That's so random, kind of. But there's just so much vocality on that team that it gives them a sort of edge that not a lot of teams have, right? Because yeah, you can have a freeze time caller, but they have 3 super strong and well-drilled mid-rounders and people who can just like take over the round at any given time, offer ideas at any given time, right? And they're very creative with the way they play. Look at their Icebox comp. What? Reyna, Jet, Gecko, Deadlock, Viper. Like, what realm are we in? And then you look at the score, 13-4. Almost a clean sweep on their attack side Icebox. 10 rounds. And the only 2 rounds that they lost were Pistol and Eco. Is that not wild?
I mean, that is kind of a domination. And what a cool comp on a map that has slightly changed. Overall, this SAD team, I guess, to give my overall thoughts, is surprisingly, let me make sure I'm phrasing this correctly. Surprisingly good if you don't follow tier 2. if this is your first time watching SAD and seeing them, I can understand and be like, who are these people? Why are they so good? Like, I know Bob, but who's Coburg? And I understand that feeling. No shade to Coburg. But
damn, my boy just got done
dropped
like that.
one map in qualifiers. And you look at their history, winning events. They played the Sean Garrett Showdown, making semifinals against Moisex Shopify, both games, 13-5, 14-6, tough losses. But that was the moment, and even a little before that, as soon as Bob came into this team, and I saw, the first few matches with her were just, everything was clicking. I was watching them against Complexity, GX3 in that Sean Garrett's event, against Turtle Troop, which they won, by the way. And that's when I started to take notice. Obviously, I knew these players through Tier 2 before, but there's something special about this combination of players. And I think you touched on is their communication must be just miles ahead of other teams, because firepower, I could say 3 or 4 other teams and challengers that theoretically on paper have more firepower, but there's something about this team that just makes them better.
They just play Valorant. They're just Valoranters, like they're kind of like the Zoomer-esque Valorant team that you can think of when you're thinking about creativity, their approach to the game. But I think my final talking point about SAD is it's like their breakout matches right now, right? Like this is the first time they've appeared on such a high level of Valorant. Like, they've been to some events. Yeah, they've competed in like one-off events, but this is like a league and there's a lot more eyes on them now. And I think there is some level of like jitterness happening in their psyche, right? Where like they're going to shed that. And when they do shed that, they're going to like level up almost immediately. And we're going to be like, wow, what is this team? But on the other side, I mean, Winthrop did show a lot of grit, especially on the second map, right? Like the Lotus was such a battle. Comps are very tame there. There wasn't anything crazy going on. And then it's nice to see that, people are still running meta comps on Ascent. So it's still the same Jet KO comp. But there's still like some sort of like tweaking happening with the way they're approaching the map. So you still see some creativity within a constrained mental box trap thing going on on that meta. But yeah, it's nice to see that these teams are trying to do something new and fresh. And I think they will level up over the season.
And speaking of new and fresh, the Glazers, players we know, players who have been around in the scene pretty much since the beginning. Drone, way back in the TSM days, Precision, and Riku. If you know Tier 2, you know these players specifically. A hard first match for them, jumping in against a Turtle Troop team that honestly, on paper might have the best roster they've ever had. Maybe that's a hot take. But I think this version of Turtle Troop could be the best version of Turtle Troop you've ever seen. And I'll leave it at that, I guess.
Yes, I'm a big asterisk next to could.
Yes.
And we'll leave it at that.
Yeah, it could. But the Glazers, Riku, again, we talk about flexibility. Just in their first match alone, Riku played Initiator, Sentinel, and Controller.
What? Like 3 different roles.
3 different roles. and almost, it still was only a -1. You have Drone playing Arrays and a Sova. You have Zachary playing Cypher. You have him on Jet. You have him on a Yoru. And then you have Precision, straight Initiator, 1 Control. Like, the flexibility in this team is crazy. Sometimes it's to a detriment, but I think teams like the Glazers, who have the firepower and have that history with each other, can afford a little bit of flexibility. Because let's be honest, this team has, I already said firepower, but it's mild in comparison to some teams. And I think flexibility is their key in my opinion.
Are we talking about Turtle Troops or TG? Because that could...
Yeah, Glazers.
Yeah, it almost feels like what you said applies to both of these teams because the talent is just impeccable. Yeah. But I think the one thing that Glazers do have that not a lot of teams probably have is like their tenure as a roster, right? Like they've been together for a while. Yeah, maybe they didn't have the most insane first showing, but I think we're gonna be pretty impressed with them throughout the season. I think they're gonna be very cohesive. They have a lot of talent, a lot of vocal players, a lot of people offering ideas on that roster. I think we'll see a pretty good showing from them. But Turtle Troops look pretty good, man. They look solid.
Yeah, that was a hard match for the Glazers to win. And Turtle Troop, potentially part of the big 3. Who knows? We'll talk about that later. And the last one on the list, YFP. One that I think a lot of people maybe slept on coming into the season. They made some roster shuffles. We weren't really sure what kind of YFP we're going to get. And then they rock up match day with Penny, Bones, Thief, Physic, Jonah. And you go, that's a roster. And not only, in my opinion, not only even do I go, that's a roster, but Bones and Penny together is kind of nasty.
No, that's a roster with like 4 question marks at the end. Like, and I'm not even trying to like be. It's not even shade. It's just like wow, what a Frankenstein roster. But somehow it is so good. And I think what throws me off is like the YFB banner org team name. They've had a lot of rosters, but I think this definitely is their best one, right? Yeah. And like Bones is such a good player, and he's played so many different roles. And like then you think like, dude, this guy's probably like what, 16 years old? Like,
yeah, he's
played literally every role in the game. He's like he's kind of what Zekin was back when Zekin was in like tier 3 and tier 2, right? He's like Zekin was playing so many roles. He was like on Sova at one point, and he started playing like all these different roles. Like Bones is kind of in the same trajectory as Zekin, right? Like it's a lot. It's a lot going on. Then you have like Physique and Jonah, who are like very vocal players. If I'm not mistaken, I think it's Physique IGLing for that team, by the way. And it's kind of weird because I've known Physique for a while, and like he was never a leader back then. But like I know as of recent, he's kind of swapped into that leadership position, which I think is really, really cool because I think he's super smart. So I think they're gonna cook up. I feel like they're gonna cook up.
I think so. I mean, shout out to Bones, obviously going all the way back to Teal Seam, if anyone remembers that.
Teal Seam.
That was kind of when Bones came on the scene. It's good to see him growing and becoming the player. I think back then we were all like, man, this kid's going to be really good. And we're starting to finally see that cemented. Excited for YFP. Moving on to Future. The Future. I know what you're thinking. We've made it through week 1. We're moving into week 2. What are the matches? What ones should I watch? I mean, the answer is you watch all of them. But the secondary answer is there's a couple that stand out to Roy and I. The first one, we've talked about both these teams. SAD M80. I don't know about you, Roy. I have a feeling that one is must-watch cinema.
It's going to be something, whether it's IMAX or indie film. It's going to be one or the other, but it's going to be something for sure. But, I mean, for M80, it's like, from my mind, it's like almost like a win-lose, right? I was like, wow, that's so crazy. What does that mean, Roy? Like, obviously, if someone's going to win, someone's going to lose. But like, if you win, you're just M80. If you lose, we kind of get a massive understanding of where SAD really is, right? Like this, when you play the big 3, right? Again, M80, Oxygen, Moist. When you play these teams, you're going to get tested on like many levels. You're going to get tested individually. Like, are you better than individual players, right? You're going to get tested in terms of like strategy, because they obviously have been cooking up for a while and they have a very deep map pool and strategy pool. And you're going to get tested in chaos, right? Like chaos management is like an element of the game that is like on a whole separate realm of Valorant, right? Like you're going to get tested on all 3 of these levels, right? Like how well can you maneuver as a team during chaos? How well do you communicate yourselves in things that are just not scriptable, right? Like you can script the early rounds. You can script mid-round ideas, right? But you can't really script late rounds. Like late rounds can kind of be scripted, but how they play out and how it pans out are like usually completely rare and kind of like their own little context to it, right? So for SAD, this is like a real test to see where they stand on these kind of like 3 realms of their gameplay, right? Like how well does their strategy and map pool add up? How well does their team play add up on that roster? And then individually, can they keep up with Koala and Nismo and some of these players who are like considered some of the best at what they do?
I mean, we're talking about Ascension runner-ups. The team that we thought, well, a lot of these players they're going to be picked up to VCT teams. It just makes sense. And then they end up back with a very similar core, and you can argue upgrade. You can argue, I would say they're right at the same level. And in an interview with Xander, he mentioned, we're not going to be the same M80. Yeah, we might have same 3 players, but with Nitro and BCJ coming in and Nitro leading, we're going to be a completely new team. I'm excited to see how that plays out. But if they get through SAD convincingly, I might get aboard the train too early. But as you mentioned, big moment for SAD. Definitely a game you need to watch. Keep your eye on Skarn. He might be the future. And I'm excited to kind of see the Nismo Qualinoob versus Skarn. At least that's how it plays out in my head. They're big gamers. And the other one...
Now what's the other match?
TSM Glazers. Now listen, I know what you're saying. TSM lost, Glazers lost. Why would we watch this match? Well, I'll tell you what. Number 1, it's TSM. Come on. And number 2, an ex-TSM player playing TSM, it's kind of writing itself a little bit here.
It really, the universe might actually be the best script writer or Riot, one or the other. We're not really sure.
Yeah.
Someone's at work, but I think I agree with you. I think that will be a nice spicy matchup.
Yeah. Depth. We talked about it. These teams need to have depth, and week 2, hopefully should have more practice under the belts. And I think that one's going to be good. And you know what? I didn't tell you this, Roy. I didn't put it in the script, but I am going to throw out an honorable mention. I'm going to throw out Core, Moisex, Shopify. And I know I can already hear people saying it's not going to be close. I'm just going to say this, and then we'll leave the topic be. Ziff and Zeldris, if they can get it together, that team will be deadly. That's going to be my point. And if it happens,
I can get behind that.
I'll tweet it. If the obvious happens, you're not going to hear me say anything. So,
Yeah, you know what? I'll throw in the Oxygen Think game in there as well.
Dude, all the crazy thing is we could have mentioned all these games because we actually could have.
We actually low-key could have.
Cool storylines all around. Oxygen Think, yeah, it's going to be a good one too. That one's on Thursday. If you're watching right now, which is Wednesday, it's tomorrow. So definitely watch those. And we're going to end with a couple thoughts. We coined this one the big dogs, and Roy disagrees with one of the teams I have written on this list. I already know.
On blast.
He already disagrees with me. Cool. Now the big dogs: M80, Moisek, Shopify, Auction. We agree there. Now
yes, the big three.
Put TTR, and Roy feels. How do you feel, Roy? I won't put words in your mouth. How do you feel about that?
I really want to get behind TTR being part of the big dogs. I really do. I look at the roster; it looks good, stellar, 100 Thieves. Like, things make sense, right? But this roster just hasn't proven itself in the same way that the big three have. Like, Oxygen has proven themselves to be a really strong contender, right? Like, they not even that long ago, they won an event with tier 1 teams who were winning internationals. It's madness. M80, crazy roster. MX, like Moisek Shopify, right? Like, super strong roster. And then it's like, can we really honestly look at ourselves and say TTR is on the same level as them as of right now without like proving themselves? Like, you kind of need to prove yourself. I'm not saying TTR is bad, okay? Do not misunderstand me. I think the roster is really sick, period. But there's just no track record. There's nothing tangible to base it on besides like how we feel and intuition. And that's where I'm standing with this.
I guess I just stand on my feelings a bit more. You know, I'm an emotional guy, Roy.
You're valid.
So, you know what? You'll be the reasonable one, and I'll be the copium one. I do agree on one point. I think they have that invisible hump to get over as a team, and a close series against the Glazers obviously is going to turn anyone off from putting them in the top 4 team list. And I think that's justified. I think that's fair, and I think this week is super important for them to solidify. We're the TTR of old, and we're better. And I think if they do that this week, maybe we can start to have that conversation. But I'll box it for now. And we do have one more thing left to do, Roy. And it's kind of a big deal. It's a little bit of a big deal. We have predictions. Now, we made fun. Maybe made fun is the wrong word. We laughed along with the talent. We poked some fun. The talent mate for their predictions. But now we have to join them in the fun cause of predictions. We'll start with Wednesday. You're watching it, obviously, on Wednesday. Good evening. And it's prediction times for Roy and I. YFP, TWT. I'll let you go first for both games on Wednesday, and then that way I can steal some of your ideas.
I was going to say the same thing to you, but you beat me. All right, fair enough.
It's unfortunate.
I'm going to go with YFP versus TWT. So I'm going to go with YFP on that one. And actually, I do want to say that will be a super close game.
Yeah.
And then for the second game between M80 and SAD, as much as it hurts me to say, I'm going to have to go with M80. They're just a Goliath, and it's going to require a lot of wits to defeat them. Yep.
I believe it or not, maybe no one saw this coming. I agree with you completely. There is nothing to argue with on Wednesday. I do think TWT, if the vetoes go their way and they catch YFP on a map that they're not 100% drilled on, I think the maps we saw from YFP last week were maps that they're absurdly comfortable on. So if TWT can steer them away from comfort picks, could go 3, could be close. But yeah, YFP M80, no brainers. I'll start Thursday off for us. Oxygen, Thinking Men. Listen, I love everybody on Thinking Men, but Oxygen need a bounce back week. If they lose this, we can start to set off little mini alarms as to what's going on here. But I don't see that happening. I think it was an off day for a majority of those players. And when you have Verno and Redux who really show up nearly every series, every map, it's really hard to beat them. So Oxygen for me is a pick there. Then
okay,
Moisek, Shopify, and Core.
Oh, come on, just say it.
Yeah, now why am I hyped? Yeah, well, listen, Moisek Shopify, they look too clean. And when a team has, the ball rolling and you're playing a team that lost last week, one team has to work harder than the other, and it's not Moistek Shopify.
Yeah. You're playing a big three, man. You're going to get tested. Like, you will be tested. This is almost a final exam, first week of school. Surprise, right? Like, you're going to get tested. And I completely agree with you. I mean, it's a no-brainer. I think Oxygen takes Think. I think for that matchup, like Oxygen versus Thinking Men, that one, low-key, there's a chance. Like, I will say it's not like a clear-cut victory, but I'm going to go with Oxygen for that one, and I'll also go with Moist for the second one.
All right, that's safe. Leading into Friday, right before your weekend, you get some honestly really great matches to end the week. We're looking at TTR, Winthrop, and then TSM, the Glazers. We already talked about most of these teams. TTR, Winthrop, man. I think, realistically speaking, this is the moment for TTR to settle in and really show why they deserve to be in the conversation for top 4. On the other hand, perfect opportunity for Winthrop to prove why they belong in Challengers. This is one of those defining games, I think, super early on for Winthrop. The sad one, close, team of your caliber, respectable. This one, I think they're punching up a bit more. And if they can at least make it, I'm not even saying they have to win. I think TTR are going to win. But if it's close for Winthrop, I think the rest of their games, they should really scrap together a couple wins. But I'm going TTR here. TSM Glazers, man, I hate being in this situation.
That's a tough one. That is a tough one.
Oh,
that is actually a really, really hard one. You're going to do it. You're going to say it.
Glazers.
Whoa. Okay, I did not expect that. Expect that. Wow. Okay. Yeah. Wow. That is...
Your turn now.
I respect it, though. I do respect it. Okay, I do want to preface for the first match between TTR and Winthrop, though, that this is like, if Winthrop loses this, they're going to go even further in the hole, right? Like, they already lost their first game. This could be their second. Starting 0-2 in the season is not good for the mental. And like, you can have fun on a team. Like, fun could be a fuel for your team for a while. But once you are not able to rack up any wins, that fun evaporates. And once that fun evaporates, that's where like the problems start arising. So you need a win. You need a win, but I'm definitely leaning Turtle Juice. I think they're a very clear overdog in my mind, at least.
I'm excited.
For the second game, it's such a hard one. That's a tough one. My intuition is saying TSM, but Glazers just, in my opinion, just have a much deeper map pool. And I feel like that map pool might low-key carry them, but I'm still gonna say TSM.
Okay.
But I feel like I'm gonna eat my words, though. But I'm going TSM.
Okay. Well, let's see. We'll do a recap next episode to kind of see where we're at, where our predictions right. What do you have? Let us know on our socials. But that's the end of episode 1 of Spike Down. Thank you so much for joining us. The matches are coming up soon, and maybe the town predictions. We'll see if they're better this week. Who knows? But thanks for watching. We'll see you on episode 2.